To the National Press Club, the place where news happens. My name is Emily Wilkins. I have the honor of being the 117th president of the National Press Club, and I am also a DC correspondent for CNBC. A huge thank you to our audience who came to the club today to hear from our speakers, who are all family members of Americans who are held hostage in Gaza for nearly a year now. These hostages, husbands, wives, parents, children, they all hold American passports, and they were among 250 people captured by Hamas fighters in Israel on October 7th and forcibly abducted to Gaza. About 110 hostages remain in Gaza, and Israeli authorities believe as many as 1/3 could be dead. Talks to negotiate a ceasefire and a release of the hostages has dragged on now for months. Hamas said earlier this month that the hostages would return to Israel in coffins if Israeli troops remain in Gaza. So this is an incredibly important and timely discussion that we'll be having this morning. As always, we do take questions from our audience. So if I will ask as many questions as time permits. If you have a question, if you can email that to headliners@press.org. That's HEADLINERS@press.org, and just write families in the subject line. We are really honored to have so many families with us today, so I'm going to keep my introduction brief to allow as much time as possible to hear from our guests. With us today, I'll start with Adi Alexander. He is the father of Idan Alexander, a 20-year-old American serving in the Israeli Defense Forces, who was stationed near Gaza on October 7th. Also with us today, Jonathan Dekel-Chen, the father of Sagi Dekel-Chen. He's a 35-year-old American husband and a father to 3 children, one who he has never met. We have Ronan Nutra, the father of Omer Nutra, a 22-year-old American serving in the IDF, who was in a tank defending the Gazan border on October 7th. Aviva Siegel, a released hostage, and the wife of American hostage Keith Siegel. Aviva was released from Hamas captivity in late November, and she continues to advocate for Keith's release, journeying between Israel and the U.S. and sharing her horrific experiences in captivity. And lastly with us is Iris Weinstein-Haggai. She is the daughter of murdered American hostages Judy Weinstein and Gad Haggai. Judy and Gad were killed by Hamas while on a morning walk on October 7th. Their bodies are still being held hostage in Gaza. Before we hear from these brave family members who have generously taken the time to talk to us today, I just want to note that in addition to the working press, our audience today does include some members of the general public. So for those watching online, just know that any reaction you might hear are probably from the general public. I also want to say that we will not tolerate any actions that disrupt this event or violate the press club's rules. If there is any activity deemed disrespectful to our guests, our security team will be acting swiftly. Now that we have taken care of the housekeeping items, I am going to hand it over to our guests. If each of you want to take a few minutes to sort of just make a statement, talk a little bit about why you're here and the family member that you're so close to who is in such a difficult situation right now.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming. We, all of us, in one measure or another, that are sitting here and the families that we represent, have been at this now for nearly a year. Something that I imagine it would be difficult to imagine if you are not actually in it, and it's a fate that I would not wish upon an enemy, to be in a place where you have a loved one being held by, not militants, not soldiers, being held by a terrorist organization that has shown no compunction whatsoever to murdering in mass, raping in mass Israeli civilians, and of course taking hostage hundreds. 101 still remain. Of those 101, 29 are from my kibbutz, Kibbutz Nir Oz, a civilian community, a cooperative farm on the border with Gaza. Of those 29, we know that 9 at least have already been murdered. Some of them, including Iris's parents, were murdered on the morning of October 7th and their bodies transported by Hamas into the Gaza Strip. we suspect that more of those 29 than just those 9 have been murdered. Over the course of the last few weeks, as you might be aware, we've heard in Israel and abroad about the IDF recovering the bodies of murdered hostages through its actions in the Gaza Strip. All of those murdered hostages were alive at least until January or February. Some of them alive until moments before IDF soldiers reached them in the tunnels under Gaza. What this means is that captivity, the captivity of all of these people, whoever might still be alive, is potentially a death sentence in itself, either through execution by Hamas captors or through friendly fire of Israeli forces, which can happen in the fog of war. So the urgency as time goes on only increases for us. It doesn't decrease. Our greatest fear is that our loved ones, whether or those who are still might be alive or those who have already been murdered, will never come home. So we are here, and this is now, I think I've lost count of how many times the families have been in Washington. We are here to urge, of course, the US government, but also all of the parties involved, for the good, not just of our family members, but to somehow, and we're seeing this play out from moment to moment, the only way it would seem to avoid a regional conflict that would then draw in other powers, the only way to diffuse that is by getting to a deal for Hamas and Israel to do all that they must, to compromise where they must, to end the conflict in Gaza and to bring the hostages home. So we thank you for your part in hearing that and trying to get that message out, whether one supports Hamas or Israel. The only way out of this is by reaching a deal, through which, of course, our loved ones come home, but the people of Gaza can begin to reconstruct their lives, and we all, including here in the United States, avoid what could be a catastrophic regional and perhaps beyond regional war.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. I didn't know if there's anyone else at the table who either wants to make an opening remark, or if not, then the one thing I sort of want to just begin by asking everyone, I know I gave a very brief bio of your loved ones, and I wanted to open up the floor if there was other things that you wanted to say about the folks who are being held in captivity.
I'm here because I was a hostage and I know what they're going through. I'm here for John and Rachel. They are not with us, that they just lost their son in such a brutal way. The 6 hostages that came home in conditions that aren't acceptable. I was there in the same kind of tunnels. I was there. I lost 10 kilos. Eden Yerushalmi weighed 36 kilos when she came out. And I'm here sitting and talking for them because they can't talk. I'm talking and screaming and shouting for them. What they're going through is beyond. What I went through is beyond. And us sitting here and knowing what they're going through, we have to be together, the whole world, and not accept. Anybody cannot do what they want to. And we can't let the evil win. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aviva.
I think I'm the father of Omer Neutra, a 22-year-old New Yorker who decided from his own Zionistic Jewish values to come to Israel, join the IDF, just like Idan Alexander, and was a first responder to the border bridge. Him and his tank rushed to try and protect the kibbutz, among them Niroz and Irim, not knowing that they will be facing hundreds and hundreds of terrorists, and RPGs and explosives will meet their tank, put on fire, and that will be taken hostage. Ever since this day of October 7, we, living in New York, have been fighting the fight together with our new family here, the members of the American-Israeli hostages, trying to speak up and make sure that the issue is not forgotten on one, but that the world understands that Israel and Hamas must reach an agreement. And of course, the news of Hirsch being murdered together with the other 5 Israelis hit us very, very strong. Personally, for us, Hirsch and Omer are similar ages. We were hoping that we can together see them coming back and try to help them get their life back and on track, and understanding how terrible the conditions are, like Aviva mentioned, how dangerous every moment is, and how delicate the situation is, and any moment that they stay there could be a death sentence for each one of our family members. Just shows the urgency, and I know the American administration understand that and try to come up with a deal that will bring our family members back. But we've been facing a very complex geopolitical situation where the Israeli government hasn't been as interested to reach a deal at times, and we've seen Hamas not interested in reaching deal at times, and we're trying to get into the timing where both sides have similar interests. Unfortunately, right now, it feels like none of the sides have any interest, and we're here to be the voice for our family members and make sure that the administration and other nations are putting all the necessary pressure to bring Israel and Hamas again to the table and to reach an agreement where our kids, our family members, our husbands and wives and grandparents are coming back. It's unacceptable. It's almost a year, and it's time. We have to get them back.
Hi, everyone. I'm Iris. I'm the daughter of Gadi and Judy, who were brutally murdered on October 7th. We didn't know what happened to them until 83 days after. So for 83 days, we didn't know if they were alive, if they were dead. And people forget the psychological terror that we are going through, that the victims, hostages, are going through right now in Gaza. And I just want to emphasize, we've been through this for 348 days. And it seems like all international pressure is being put on Israel. And I'm asking myself, where's the outrage of the international community about innocent hostages being taken from their beds on October 7th into Gaza? And there's a sentence that Danny Danod said in the UN. He said, "It is far easier to criticize a democratic government than to confront the reality of dealing with terrorists." And we are dealing with terrorists right now, terrorists who are not only terrorizing 101 hostages, they are holding my parents as bargaining chips in Gaza. That in itself is sick and should be completely horrifying to everybody. But they are terrorizing their own people. You can see the Gazans are starting to raise their voices against Hamas. The international community must create some kind of coalition, pressure Hamas more, show Hamas they cannot terrorize this world, and we have to fight this together. And the key to doing that is to release the hostages, first of all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Iris. Adi?
Good morning. My name is Adi Alexander. I'm father of Idan Alexander, a 20-year-old kid from New Jersey that grew up in New Jersey, graduated from the high school, and voluntarily drafted to the IDF, found himself on the border on that October 7, along with Omer Nutra at the same post. And after a fight, he managed to surrender and was taken hostage into Gaza. Just to emphasize of what Iris was talking, last month we met President Biden along with Prime Minister Netanyahu that promised us on that meeting that he will work for the deal, for the ceasefire, but that promise has not been fulfilled. And it must be. Our kids cannot serve as bargaining chips in the midst of US elections and in the limbo of Israeli politics. They need to be prioritized. It's a humanitarian issue. They are simply, in our case, Omer and Idan, they were soldiers protecting territorial integrity of the sovereign state within its borders, and they were taken from Israel into Gaza. And for the past 344 days, it's almost a year, they're still there. This is unacceptable. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Adi, and thank you so much to everyone for being here today. I'm going to have a couple questions here. Of course, we'll be looking for questions from the audience, and I'm just going to sort of do the questions in a way where we'll open it up to any of you if you feel comfortable answering. If you want to build upon someone else's answer, we can treat this as a bit of a conversation. And Jonathan, I know you mentioned initially that you guys have been to D.C. upteen times at this point, talking with lawmakers, talking with the administration. Is there anything specific that you are here for on this particular trip, in addition to joining us today, that you want to spotlight?
Well, look, it's an ongoing situation, obviously, because our loved ones, as Adi mentioned, are caught in the midst of sort of so many different conflicts, really. And as we know, the north of Israel is, the violence is escalating. There is a real danger and our fear that because of the escalating conflict, not only is the whole region in danger of quite literally going up in flames, but that the need to recover the hostages and the necessity of defusing the conflict in Gaza is going to be forgotten. Whether that's intentionally planned by the Israeli government or not doesn't really matter. Those are just the facts. So we are here in our meetings that we will be having with the highest US government officials and perhaps people in Congress as well, is to say, look, we have enormous respect and appreciation for everything that you've been doing. And we were in conversation with President Biden within a couple of weeks, perhaps even less than that, from October 7th, and with all manner of administration officials, by October 10th and 11th. They've been incredibly forthcoming. Their doors have been open to us. We have conversations with them, by the way, something that is inconceivable in our own Israeli government, those kind of conversations. So we're very aware as Israeli Americans of what the Biden administration has been doing for us and all of the hostages. That being said, it's clear that we've reached a kind of impasse right now in terms of the plans for a negotiated agreement based on the principles that President Biden put forth in late May. Something's got to give, because it's not just the 6 hostages who were returned home a couple of weeks ago, these beautiful young people from an outdoor concert who were executed in cold blood, days, perhaps hours before they were rescued. Before that, another 6 hostages got less press abroad, were returned. Amongst those 6 older gentlemen, all grandfathers, among them 4 older men from our kibbutz. Men that I've known for 40 years, one of them kind of a blood brother. So as good as that plan may have been, as well-intentioned as that plan has been, we have two immovable, for the moment, two immovable forces. The Israeli government, which is a hard thing to say, and Hamas. We are, to the degree that we can as private citizens, are going to be urging the US government to rethink perhaps the approach and rethink how pressure can be applied to both sides through the intermediaries, through whatever is going to work to get them, both sides, to yes. So in the short term, that's the plan.
We've been advocating for our families for so long, almost a year. And I think everybody here on the panel and other families as well have been interacting with both sides of the aisle. Orna and myself spoke at the RNC. We all heard John and Rachel at the DNC. We are calling for all sides to work together to continue to keep this issue a bipartisan issue, knowing that we have one goal in mind: get our hostages, get our family members back home. Having said that, the administration, as Jonathan said, have been very open to listen to us, to share with us their strategy and their thoughts. But as we say, the proof is in the pudding. Almost a year later, we haven't seen our children, our husbands and sisters and grandfathers coming back. And we're urging the administration to think out of the box and to come up with a strategy that will enforce both sides, Hamas and Israel, to reach an agreement that is so much needed. And we are calling again on both parties, even during this election period, knowing that there are so many issues that are tearing this country apart. This issue should be a unifying issue. Everybody should be calling on rescuing and taking the hostages out urgently, knowing that they're dying over there.
I just want to show everybody, this is Keith 3 weeks before he was kidnapped. Sorry. And this is Keith from the video that came out in April. He looks 20 years older. He's lost so much weight. While I was there with him, he'd lost at least 10 kilos. And I want everybody to look at him. He's 65 years old. He's an American citizen. And he does not belong to Hamas. I'm not a leader of this world, but if I was, Keith would be out. And I'm asking and begging leaders, we need this world to be a better world for Keith and for all the hostages. My grandchildren are waiting for their grandfather. They cannot live knowing that their grandfather will just stay there forever or die there, and we want them all back alive, not in boxes.
Thank you, Aviva. Thank you, Ronan. I don't know if anyone else wanted to weigh in on the mission for DC, but it sounds like from what I am hearing that for the most part, it seems like the U.S. is communicative. Members are taking meetings, they're paying attention, but there is a lot of concern at this point, perhaps with both Hamas as well as the Israeli government. And I'm wondering if you have a message for Netanyahu, Prime Minister Netanyahu, as to what he needs to be doing at this point and how he needs to be thinking about freeing the hostages.
Actually, I would like to call on President Biden to tell Prime Minister Netanyahu, do not delay the deal. And Egypt and Qatar must send the same message to Hamas. Now, we hear numerous reports about the hardening of Hamas positions. We're hearing from, even from the Israeli security experts and negotiators themselves, that Prime Minister Netanyahu is also hardening the position and delaying the deal by shifting the goalposts and undercutting his own negotiating team. Now, when we approach a year mark in this situation, President Biden must make it clear that this time it cannot fail.
Thank you so much, Adi. And I see that we're now joined, I know he was coming from the airport, Ruby Hien, the father of Itai Hien, a 19-year-old American who was serving with the IDF on the border of Gaza on October 7th. In March, it was revealed that Itai had been killed on October 7th, and his body had been taken to Gaza, where it remains. Ruby, I wanted to give you the floor for a minute if you wanted to say anything about your son, about your goals for this particular trip in D.C., or any other remarks you would like to make.
Yeah. Morning. Thank you for being here, and I hope I will not be repetitive to others that have spoken before me. I'll just share a short statement that I had in mind. So, a phone call, you know, it's a simple function that we all experience dozens of times a day. For a hostage family, a phone call could have a much more dramatic impact than you can imagine. Since October 7th, you know, we've had various episodes where we had dreadful days of waiting for that phone call. The last time we felt this type of agony was on the eve of September 1st. That was about 3 weeks ago, where we heard rumors of the IDF finding 6 killed hostages. And we, all of us, you know, kind of called our officers wanting to know what's going on, and they said, you just need to be patient. And you wait by the phone. And we waited by the phone till about 3 a.m. in the morning, until the families that were notified got notified. And we saw on the television the names of those loved ones that we also have come to know and recognize, and one of them being a U.S. family, Helsh Goldberg, Poland. I come, you know, this time to the States. My family has endured unimaginable pain for almost a year. This will be the 10th time that I've come to D.C. to advocate for the return of my son, as well as all of the other 100 other hostages. And I have to say that my expectations for this visit is a bit low, where we do not foresee a breakthrough in the current dialogue between the parties to reach a deal to release all of the hostages. I call on the Biden administration to reevaluate its basic assumptions, how to reach a deal for the American 7, including the assumption that U.S. citizens will be released via a phased deal, that Israel and Hamas will be willing to make significant concessions. The U.S. needs to stop being a facilitator and act as if its citizens are being held by a hostage, ruthless terrorist organization, and creates the path with all of its powers at its disposal to release its citizens in danger. Thank you.
Emily, if I could, I'm going to go back to the question you asked before, if we had a message to Prime Minister Netanyahu. So I'm speaking purely on my own behalf. This would be it. Until October 6th, my day job was as a historian at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. And I am quite sure that Prime Minister Netanyahu and his government, if they do not act decisively now, do everything that they must to get our hostages home and to end the madness in Gaza, will be remembered as a catastrophe for the state of Israel since its inception in 1948. As Adi mentioned, it is now widely known that this government and Netanyahu at its helm have put up consistently obstacles to completing the process of negotiation. However evil Hamas is, and we know how evil Hamas is, it is incumbent on Israeli leadership to do just that, to lead for the people of Israel who have spoken in the streets by the hundreds of thousands. Recently, there was a demonstration to protest the government's behavior around this that was approximately 700,000 people. Do the math, that's about 35 million Americans out in the streets within a one-day period protesting its government's actions. Not only that, for weeks, if not months, senior IDF and intelligence officials have been saying out loud, this is unheard of in Israel, that there is nothing to be gained by incremental military advances that would justify the sacrifice of more hostages' lives. One can't be clearer than that. So by throwing out, into the public view with press conferences in Israel, in Hebrew and in English, these ideas about national interests, if it's the Philadelphia corridor or any other incremental military gain, when our own defense establishment, who are not politicians, are saying precisely the opposite. I call from here to Prime Minister Netanyahu to put aside, for now, whatever political interests you have, enough of the politicizing, not politicizing the hostages within Israeli domestic politics and radiating that outward to the American political system. Enough. Find your moral backbone. Find the political courage and the personal courage to do what the vast majority of Israelis know is the right thing to do, which is to bring the hostages home and by virtue of that, stop the madness in Gaza and perhaps, we hope, defuse what will be a bloody war for us all.
I want to remind Biden and Bibi Netanyahu that Keith is 65 years old, thrown underneath the ground, and can hardly breathe, not knowing if he'll ever get out there alive, begging and begging and crying. And all the hostages there are in such bad conditions. I was there, I had infection in my stomach, I was sick, I was scared, I was crying, I was begging. I was taken underneath the ground, and I was sure in a couple of hours I'm going to be dead. There was no oxygen there for me to breathe. So I know what they're going through, and I want to ask Bibi, Netanyahu, and Biden if it was one of their relatives or one of their lovers, if they think they're doing enough for us, because we have had enough. And they, the hostages, have had more than enough. And it's for us to scream and just help everybody to understand that the situation is so dangerous. And I want to tell everybody that I want Keith back alive, and I want all the hostages back alive.
I just want to add, people keep saying they will come back in boxes. That's not always the case. My parents are still there, murdered, somewhere in Gaza. We don't know where they are. We don't know anything. Our family is on pause since October 7th. We don't have any closure. All we have is intelligence about what happened to them. I have an 8-year-old child. She keeps asking me, Mommy, but if they died, where's their grave? Can we visit their grave? It was Memorial Day. We don't even have a grave to cry on. So I just want to say that, yes, we need to pressure Bibi for everything, but I have to remind you, there are 23 nationals that are currently held hostage, and I'm asking the international community to put pressure on Hamas to release all hostages. It is a UN resolution to release families' remains back to their families. This is something that needs to be implemented. It needs to be demanded by all of the countries of hostages who were murdered, and this is not happening. We don't hear any international pressure, and we need that closure. I haven't worked for a year almost a year, because I can't. All I've been doing for 348 days is working to get my parents back. That's all I've been doing. So Bibi needs to do what he needs to do, not only to bring back my parents, bring back all the hostages, the ones who can be saved alive. They need to bring the ones who were murdered back to respectful burial so we can have closure. But he needs to bring everybody back so Israel can start rehabilitating, so they can start recovering from this huge, huge trauma that we're all in. People who have hostages, family hostage in Gaza, but also all of Israel. And also, people need to understand this is a terrorist group. This is an assault on democracies all over the world, not just Israel. It's not a war between Israel and Arabs, Jews and Palestinians. This is a global threat to democracies, and international community has to understand that and work to pressure to release all hostages immediately. Thank you.
I'd like to remind the Israeli Prime Minister some of the Jewish values that our son that was born in New York, grew up in the United States, grew up on. And some of them are including the value of human life and the fact that we don't leave anybody behind, and the importance of letting go of hostages and prisoners. Those are deep Jewish values that we know that the Prime Minister is very well aware of, but somehow we feel that he forgot them. And we feel that political agendas are taking over, and his survival is much more important than taking care of the national interest of Israel. And right now, the Israel nation is craving for those hostages to come out. We've seen the numbers of people that go out in the streets in Israel protesting. We know how many people care here in the United States about this issue. And we've seen the Prime Minister involved in possibly changing this minister or the other minister in his cabinet in the middle of a war. We are appalled by these actions, and we are calling on him to stick to the Jewish values and the core values of Israel, not leaving anybody behind, taking hostages out, and making sure that every life is precious. He has to remember those as he's making decisions, and the time is now.
Thank you, Ronan. We have a few questions that we've gotten from the audience. The first is, how can Israel accomplish its goal of annihilating Hamas and preventing another October 7th while getting the hostages back home? And I will just say, if you feel compelled to answer, absolutely. If you don't, then that is totally fine, and we'll move on to the next question.
Well, you don't have to believe any of us. We're partisan, for our own loved ones. The IDF senior command and the intelligence services have already said that Hamas is degraded enough right now, following Israeli military actions in June and July, to come to a negotiated agreement with Hamas to return the hostages. The only party in Israel who is denying that is the Prime Minister and his government, most of whom are unqualified to even approach a judgment like that. This is a choice that our political leaders are making. It is not, the military aspect of this has already been solved. So it's perhaps a legitimate question in principle, but in practice, it's already been answered by our military authorities. In Israel, there's also this, I suppose, this counter-argument, yes, of course, but these same military leaders were responsible for the disaster of October 7th. Perhaps so was Prime Minister Netanyahu and his government. Prime Minister Netanyahu has been in office more or less consecutively since 1996. He has refused to accept any responsibility or accountability for what happened on October 6th. So that argument about What about Israel's national security? It's been answered by the people who understand that question the most deeply and have the most to lose by being wrong, put it that way.
Let me try to add to Jonathan. So Hamas, as a entity that can attack Israel, is no longer, that is according to the Minister of Defense and the head of Chief of Staff that I met last week. They stay as a terrorist organization. But Hamas is a ideology. Ideology is not something that you could totally dismantle. There needs to be an alternative for the people that live in Gaza that will support a different type of entity, and that takes time, and that's exactly what needs to happen. The second point is regarded to the fact that you need to be able to build some sort of coalition that are not fundamentalists, but pragmatics in the region to be able to come together and try to bring some sort of better future for all the people in the region. So it's not a simple military answer. It's more complicated than that.
Thank you. We also have another question from the audience. The U.S. says that it's not ready to present the bridging proposal yet to Israel after Hamas's added demands. What do you think that the U.S. should do right now?
Well, last time I checked, we're hostage families, and we're not, in charge of the negotiations. We've had, honest, eye-level discussions since October with U.S. officials. Each of us has our ideas, which we share with them, and they listen. We'll let them make that determination about what exactly they should be doing. I think what we can say with confidence that what has been done to date is not enough, and I believe if President Biden were up here on the stage, he would say exactly the same, that enough will be done when all 101 hostages are home.
I know that the whole world is looking at what's happening in the United States. And I know that the whole world is waiting for the United States to be much stronger and that this war will end as soon as possible and hostages will come home.
Thank you. Another question from the audience. I know we've talked a lot about the different groups that are involved in these negotiations, but we have a question about Israelis' opposition parties. What should they be doing to get a deal for the hostages?
So I believe that the Israeli opposition should try to combine its forces and not think about short-term politics, but the long-term future of the state of Israel, and unite around those values and come together and do as much as possible to bring Israel to a better future. That the key, one of the keys to it, is the hostages that the people of Israel for 1 year have felt stuck, meaning we've been stuck for about a year in all levels of the society. And in order to uncork, that feeling that the people have, I think the opposition, as I said, should come together and unite and find ways to build a better future for the state of Israel.
I would also just add to that. Look, generally speaking, I don't think you'll find many people at all in Israel who reject this proposition that Hamas has to be destroyed or degraded as much as possible. We know that's already been accomplished. What's been missing, at least from my perspective, from the opposition, is an alternative plan for the day after. Ruby mentioned that before. Our government has yet, the Israeli government, has yet to speak even in the vaguest terms about what happens in Gaza the day after the fighting stops. There's a reason for that, which I don't think the question asks, so I'll leave it at that. But my expectation, my hope for the Israeli opposition, as disempowered as it is because of our electoral system, which we won't get into now, to at least put out there viable plans for the day after, there's simply a vacuum, and that prevents some Israelis for agreeing to go forward, because no one has a clue as to what Gaza is going to look like the day after the bullets stop flying and the bombs stop raining down.
Thank you. I know a number of you have mentioned that you need support from the international community, that you think that there can be more pressure that can be exerted to sort of bring about an end of this conflict. And I wanted to see if you could sort of go into detail a little bit as far as who you think needs to act, what they need to do.
I think we can start with the most obvious one, which is the ICRC. No aid organization has seen the hostages. The only proof of life people have right now is from IDF intelligence. So we can start from that. We go to other aid organizations who have done nothing to condemn Hamas. Then we go to the UN, which has been completely biased and pointing fingers at Israel only. They haven't condemned Hamas once. Speaking from my own experience, we're trying to organize some kind of event for hostages. No country wants to host this event just because hostages, Israeli hostages, are involved. And this speaks volumes. This speaks so much volumes. These are innocent hostages. And you have to understand, October 7th happened and it was horrific. But our kibbutz has been bombed for 20 years. We have safe rooms in our homes because our government supposedly values life. We have amazing invention called an Iron Dome that was invented to protect the citizens. Right now, my kibbutz, there are refugees. There are 200,000 refugees in Israel. I haven't heard one thing mentioned about this at the UN. And again, there are 23 nationals held hostage right now in Gaza. I don't see any pressure from these countries demanding the immediate release of all hostages. So we need more pressure on Hamas to release these hostages who were taking on a ceasefire. It was a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas, a terror organization, and nobody's talking about it. Nobody's talking about this. It's as if our loved ones became this political card, political chips, not only for Hamas and Israel, but also for this whole world to create a certain agenda that I'm not going to get into. But I am pleading with the international community to pressure Hamas, a terrorist group. They are a listed terror entity in most of the Western countries, and we have to pressure them to release all hostages. There was an American executed. He was executed, and there are Hamas flags being waved in New York. Where's the consequences for these inhumane acts? Not only they were executed, they were held underneath the ground from money, tax-paying money that we pay to UNRWA, that our Prime Minister of Israel sent money to Gaza, that we know 70% of the aid that goes into Gaza goes to Hamas. That money financed those tunnels that they are held in right now, that they are suffocating, that Aviva was in. It's just inhumane, and it's really heartbreaking for me that the world doesn't understand how inhumane this issue is. Every second of the day, we think about these people. This is not only my parents, my friends are held there. We don't know if they're dead or alive. We don't know anything. And people have to come together, the international communities, the governments. We have to come together to demand their release. This is crucial. There is no time. There is no time. Thank you.
I will just add, Iris talked a lot about the diplomatic dimension. I just want to add the economic dimension. So for a fact, I could say that last week, Hamas was able to pay again to tens of thousands of supporters, militant and operators inside of Gaza. That would be the amount of tens of millions of dollars. That means that the oxygen, the financial oxygen, is still in place. And there's also a need to call for the economic sanctions. There's money flowing in from US allies, NATO parties, as well as countries from South Asia as well, that have been able to continue to have money flow into Gaza. That is unacceptable. And that oxygen needs to be cut off. This is not about the humanitarian aid. It's about money that Hamas is using to funnel and continue to get support from its military and from operators that are holding these hostages.
And Ronan, I also saw that you wanted to add.
Yeah, I just want to talk about this notion of negotiation. I want to remind everybody, we're not negotiating here between two regular governments, two normal bodies that can negotiate in good faith and reach an agreement. The Hamas party in this negotiation is a terrorist organization we all recognize that is not willing to compromise and are holding our family members. And as such, what United States and the other mediators are trying to do is try to bring Israel closer to the Hamas requests and requirements in order to release the hostages, which is basically stop the war and an exchange of a terrorist with blood on their hand in hundreds and thousands in return for our family members. This is not a real normal negotiation. And as such, we, based on history, have seen that an Israeli soldier was held in captivity for 5 years, and Israel, at the end, gave exactly what Hamas wanted for that one soldier, which was 1,200 terrorists, among them Sinwar himself. And that only happened when the same prime minister that we have right now, Bibi Netanyahu, had the political will, from his own reasons, to let it go, to make it happen. So I'm asking everybody here, are we going to wait 5 years now for the moment where Bibi Netanyahu will have that same political aspiration or condition that will allow him to agree to a deal? Do we need to wait 5 years? And will our dear ones survive those 5 years? The pressure, obviously, must be put on Hamas, but the political will is in the hands of the Prime Minister of Israel, and he needs to agree to a deal. And unfortunately, our dear ones were taken. So they are holding them, and they make the call. So he needs to agree and reach that settlement that United States is trying to reach. And we're calling on them to find a settlement that will work, that will not take hundreds and hundreds of days. We need our dear ones sooner. We're calling for a one deal that will bring them home in a short period of time. And it has to happen urgently because they are dying there.
I know that we're nearing the end of our time together. I did want to ask, particularly because we are here at the National Press Club, can you talk for a little bit about how the media has covered the story of the hostages? Are there stories the media is not telling? Are there things they can be doing better? I know we've talked a little bit during this about referring to Hamas as a terrorist organization rather than a militant group, but I'm wondering if there are other things that you've seen with the media coverage that you think could be improved.
I would start with one request. Why is the international media, including the US media, of course, not demanding or not pointing out, really, and highlighting the fact that neither the Red Cross nor the Red Crescent have been allowed to visit any of the hostages for over a year? I would start with that as kind of a faux pas within the media, and be aware of sort of the false equivalency between Hamas and what Hamas has done, and what Israel in general, but certainly the Israeli people are doing. There's a lot of false equivalency. I think it's gotten a little bit better in recent months, but it's something that troubles, I think, me, but almost all Israelis. And that's a place to start.
I think language plays a key role here. And, even with the horrific execution of Hirsch, the media used the word died in captivity. He didn't die in captivity. He was executed in cold blood. And him, along with other 5 and other 7 from our kibbutz, back in February, I believe. So language plays a key role. Even when I see media speaking about my parents, they are believed to be dead. They are not believed to be dead. They were murdered on October 7th, and their bodies were taken into Gaza viciously as a bargaining chip. And this is not a mistake. This is done consciously, and it serves an agenda. And we have to think about this because, again, we have to remember, this is a terror entity that is listed in the United States. They are not a militant group. They are not a democratic government. And as I said, it's far easier to criticize a democratic government than to face the reality of dealing with terrorists. And I feel that the media needs to hold itself accountable. These are 101 hostages who are held right now. These are 7 Americans who are held right now in Gaza. And for some reason, the media doesn't condemn this. They can play a key role here in saving our loved ones. And I'm not putting everything in their basket. Of course, this is a huge picture with many, many different parts in it. But they have a role in this. And, we are not fighting just a physical war. This is also an information war that, unfortunately, Israel is not doing enough to win. And I feel the media has a very, very big role in this, and language should be thought of before it's used.
I just have one data point that I'd like you to amplify. 46 U.S. citizens have been killed by this terrorist organization. The majority of the U.S. public do not know that fact. And we've actually highlighted that to the White House and asking, why is that a known fact? So I ask the support of the good people here of the media, amplify that fact and ask the United States and its government, what is it doing to seek justice for those 46 U.S. citizens that were killed?
I want to ask everybody if it means anything that Keith's American, because I don't know.
Thank you all. I know at this point we are at about time. I would certainly want to be respectful to your schedules. I know you have a busy day, and we deeply, deeply appreciate that you took time to spend with us. I can't imagine what it must be like having an entire year of trying to tell your story, to push, to meet, to have to continually go over this again and again and again. But we were grateful for you to come today and for continuing to share your story with us.
Thank you for having us.
Before we close, and I do have one final question, but before I get to that, I do want to thank our headliners team that puts on this event, Donna Lyman-Leger, Lori Russo, Jen Judson, and then, of course, as well, Jamie Horwitz and Frank Maziano. They were the folks who helped out with today's specific event, as well as the club's program manager, Cecily Scott Martin. The final question, I do want to try and leave on an optimistic note. I know that's hard to do in this particular situation. But I'm wondering if you have gotten any advice, good advice, or encouraging words from those who have been in similar situations, who have also had family members and loved ones held hostage elsewhere throughout the world.
I think we can call out here, or shout out, the Foley Foundation have been really embracing of us. and have shared the wisdom, to the degree that they have it, about how to handle such situations and to just be embraced by people who shared and are still sharing similar fates.
Unfortunately, I've come to know many hostage families around the world, hostages held in Iran and Russia. All they keep telling me is keep fighting. This is, again, it's not just an assault on Israel. This is an assault on democracy. This is, unfortunately, it all comes down to the Islamic regime in Iran who is conducting all of this. And we have to be loud. We have to put our foot down and demand that this hostage-taking tactic is not normalized. This cannot be normalized. And, we all saw the amazing Russian prisoner exchanged, and it just proves how much a united coalition can help get our hostages back home. That's what happened there, and it needs to happen with our loved ones as well. And, for all hostage families around the world, just keep fighting, and, we will do everything we can to make this be a lesson to the world. These are 240 hostages that we're taking out of their beds. They're innocent hostages taken out of their beds. The world should be on their feet right now. And for some reason, the world is not.
I want to speak about some silver lining that we found through the process of dealing with a very difficult year, and seeing beautiful communities around us, supporting us, marching with us, speaking about our son and all the other hostages, and praying. And we know that our son, when he was in school, he was praying for the release of Gilad Shalit and for another American hostage, Ellen Gross. And we met Ellen Gross few weeks back in Washington here, and just to see him and to know that he survived a few years in captivity, to know that our son, deep in the tunnels of Gaza, knows that hundreds and thousands of people are thinking about him and praying for him. This is the energy that we want to send him, and we are driving ourselves on, and we appreciate everything the communities are doing for us and all the wonderful people we've met through the process. Thank you.
Well, Ruby, Adi, Jonathan, Iris, Ronan, and Aviva, thank you guys so much for joining us today. Thank you to your families for being here as well with us. And thank you so much to everyone who joined this event, both in person and online. Thank you very much.